Hello, welcome to Be Well. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jonathan from your YMCA, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to bring you these conversations with leaders in their field related to living mindfully. As your moderator, I come to you with 30 plus years of experience in mindfulness, wellness, and mental health. Our topic today allows us to be very intentional and aware of how to get a good night's sleep. I'm very excited to introduce you to Dr. Nancy Lin, who is a sleep expert, the founder of Go Sleep San Diego. Our topic is Overcoming Coronasomnia, a guide to a good night's sleep. Dr. Nancy Lin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So I really enjoyed the other day, we were just talking a moment ago, how the other day we talked about various things that I already took some of those gems and was sharing it with my family and friends. So today we have the opportunity to share it with others. So I appreciate that. So if you will, Dr. Lin, start us off in terms of the significance of sleep, the function of sleep, and what happens when it gets disrupted.
Yeah, absolutely. So sleep is one of those things, when it's going well, we just kind of take it for granted, right? It's not something we try to do typically, we just do it. And if you consider that typically people sleep between, say, 6 to 8 hours a night, that's really close to 25% to a third of our lives, right? So if we're doing something that's taking up that much of our existence, it's got to be something that is quite important. And what we know is that some of the ways in which sleep does impact us is that it helps us to remember things. It helps us to consolidate memory. It helps us to recover from the stresses of the day. And when we get sick, we actually require not just light sleep, but we require a certain level of deep sleep in order to really kind of allow our immune systems to repair our bodies. So sleep is absolutely important on many, many fronts.
So obviously the contrast is when we don't get good sleep, it disrupts all those different things, our memory, our how alert we are.
It's hard to ignore, right? When somehow just getting that sentence out feels like a real big effort because you just don't know what words you're trying to pick. Anything from that to just getting so tired that you're not really able to even stay functioning. For some folks, that by the afternoon, they're kind of needing or feel the need to reach for some coffee just to make sense of what's going on around them. And it can be a real difficult thing to still do things that might also be important, like go out and exercise and cook a healthy meal. Like it might be really tempting just to take a nap or get something at the drive-through real quick. These are all just real world problems we face.
So, and I know that can be a slippery slope, but before we go that direction, this past year has been, as many would say, an extraordinary year. And so how has the pandemic fed into the challenges that we might have in terms of sleep? I know there's even the term that's been coined, coronasomnia. So obviously it's something prevalent in the collective right now.
Absolutely. And so, sleep is one of those things where, again, when it's going well, we don't really think about it. And when it isn't going well, we think about it an awful lot. And to kind of think about the past year's pandemic as a big disruptor of our routines is, I think, a pretty helpful way to think of it. So consider that many of us are going out a whole lot less. We are perhaps working from home, or we're not working, or we are, engaged in childcare while working. The sort of the iterations are many, but overall, we're doing something different than what we're used to doing. And when we lose the old routine of how life is paced, we often underestimate how much our sleep is affected. Sleep, in order to get good sleep, our body needs certain cues. It needs to be exposed to a certain amount of sunlight by a certain time of day. It requires us to move around, right? It requires us to digest kind of at the same time every day. All those things are hints to our bodies about how to be. And without even getting into how upsetting it is to, not know if we're going to be safe, not know if our family members are going to be safe, if our livelihoods are going to be safe, even without the added anxiety of the coronavirus itself, just the disruption to our routines is quite a lot of stress on our bodies and our mechanisms for sleep.
So that sets up well in terms of what has happened this last year, how our schedules have been very disrupted and set anew, and has been a lot of transition where we're at home, then maybe going into work part-time or working remotely. You spoke of sunlight and how important that is in terms of those body cues, and with us being home, we're often not out in nature as much, not exercising as much. So that gets us to here and now. And so what do you recommend at this point in time, how to get back to a good night's sleep?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's tricky, but if we were to really just try to simplify it down, it might actually serve us best. Consider that our bodies are really designed pretty much the same as our cave people forebearers, right? That because we are, we're smart, we innovate, we've done things to nature to help us get on in the world. We've created things like electrical lighting. We have TV, we have computers, and all these things are great innovations. And they also come at a cost to our ability to interact with nature. So consider that we were well designed, our biologies are well designed to get early morning sunlight. That is our cue to get up and get active for the day. And then throughout the day, we are designed to have activity in our bodies. And then towards the end of the day, as it starts to get dark, it's time to kind of, get close to our family members and huddle around the fire and not be out for predators to get us. That's kind of what we were built to do. And so when we introduce technology, or when we introduce a more sedentary and peaceful lifestyle, there are these trade-offs. So, if you can, try to stay close to nature to the degree that it makes sense. In the morning, do try to get some sunlight. And if you're in a place where you can't get sunlight, turn on some lights. Now we have that to our advantage. In the evening, try to respect that if the sun isn't out, you probably don't want to introduce too much light into your life either. That is one of the major cues about when it's daytime and when it's nighttime. So we're talking about cell phones and computer screens and TVs that in the evening, if you can try to, not go overboard with that, that'll help your body know when it's time to go to bed.
That's very helpful. I love kind of hearkening back to the cave person and how our body was meant to respond to the natural rhythm of the day and nature. That's helpful for me. I think about when my sleep is disrupted, and often it is that there's things that are weighing on my mind at night, and I can kind of start that process of, I've got this going on, I need to work on this. And so I get into this space that just keeps me awake. And it's difficult to let go of because it's so important.
And I think the last time we talked, I kind of used the analogy of the Lamborghini, right? That our greatest and latest, improvement as compared to other creatures living on Earth is that we have this really powerful brain. We have this mind that has really allowed us to innovate and do well in our environment. By the same token, as with sports cars, the thing that is the latest and greatest is also the thing that's most likely to break down, right? It's always that latest innovation, that new version of whatever that has the most bugs in it. And so where this happens in humans is that we have this ability to think a lot. And it's not always easy for us to know how to slow that down and to get back in our bodies because actually sleeping, ironically, is one of those things that you can't do better by trying harder, right? It's that irony where when your mind starts to get involved to want to sleep and you're trying so hard, it's actually when your body checks out and in fact, it becomes harder to sleep.
That was one of the takeaways I had when you and I talked the other day of the harder you try to sleep, the more challenging it gets. And I think of the whole idea of just simplifying. And so if you'd speak to that in terms of, here we are trying to sleep, we're working at it, and your prescription was to keep it simple, I think was the words that you shared.
Yeah, and for some folks, and myself included, I definitely run on the more anxious side. If I could, really try hard, I will. But this is where that needs to, you need to ask your mind to step aside, right? So keeping it simple means going back to what you remember working before, right? So if what worked before wasn't that you were trying so hard to sleep, but that you'd like to listen to some music in the evening, right? Or you like to just roll around on the ground with the kids or with the dog, or do something that was relaxing for you. Maybe even doing a little bit of stretching or, coloring, whatever it is. Keeping it really simple so that your mind starts to learn a pattern, like, oh yeah, this is the time where I don't need to so much be all over everything. This is the time to kind of relax. This is the time, if I were a cave person, I'd be sitting around the fire, just staring at the fire with people that I feel safe around. And as the fire starts to die down, it'll be my cue to get in the cave and kind of tuck in for the night. That's really kind of the atmosphere that we want to create, because it's not going to be through our sheer will that we get sleep. It's going to be simply providing the right kind of environment for the sleep fairy to land on us and sort of grace her with our presence. It's not because we're grabbing Tinkerbell out of the air and making her land on us. It's something that's a little more subtle than that, and we know how to do it. We've just maybe forgotten that it can sometimes be that simple. Maybe not easy, but simple.
What I appreciate about what you're sharing, Dr. Lynn, is that in mindfulness, it talks about connecting back with the body and releasing the mind. And as the mind is preoccupied, just to let it, like clouds, float on by. And so that giving greater priority to the body over the mind, especially with something such as sleep, because as you said, the mind's not going to help us get there per se. It's really connecting with the body.
Right. Absolutely.
So what are the biggest challenges, the biggest obstacles to a good night's sleep?
These days, I think it's actually trying too hard. So overcompensating, I think, is probably it. So what I'm talking about here is, say you wake up and you realize, man, I just didn't sleep very well last night. I woke up for a couple hours and in the middle of the night, and here it is, my alarm's going off. I don't really want to get up yet. The very human and very understandable part of you will probably want to stay in bed for longer, right? And maybe you do, maybe you don't. You wake up, you get up, and maybe you put on an extra few cups of coffee just because you kind of anticipate knowing how the day's going to go. And then maybe you kind of don't feel like doing your workout because you've been so tired. So you skip that workout. And then nighttime comes and your mind is still going, and maybe there's still some caffeine in your body from having had so much extra coffee. So maybe you have a couple of glasses of wine to chill back out at night. So I've named a whole bunch of different things you've done differently as a result of not sleeping as well the night before. And all of them are going to have some impact on you. And some of them are going to be unintentional. And those unintended consequences, if you keep them up for days and days, weeks and weeks, will absolutely change your ability to naturally go to sleep. And so if you find yourself kind of having made these little decisions along the way and they have maybe served their purpose, see if you can start to let go of some of these, cut down on different things you might be putting into your body, knowing that, your body will know what to do if it can return to a previous state of when you were able to sleep better. Yeah.
I noticed after we talked the other day, I applied some of what you were sharing because with the time change, it's a little darker in the morning, and so it's easy for me to say, the alarm goes off 5:30. I'll sleep a little bit longer, and then I reset that. I snooze a little bit longer, and then I'm a little. It doesn't support me by doing that. I find that I'm still tired, even if I sleep a little bit longer. But your prescription to get up, follow that routine was very helpful. The last 2 days, I'm on a stretch here, got up at the regular time that I would like to get up, went out and exercised, and it has helped me through have a productive day, get a good night's sleep again. And so it's interesting what you do mentally. I should sleep more and all those things versus having that routine and the significance of that routine.
Yeah, I'm so glad that that's been helpful for you. Yeah, and the other thing too is, do your best, right? Do your best, but don't go overboard because, again, our minds, right? Our minds are like the thing that can undo some of these things. If you get too like rigid about what needs to happen, like I have to get up at 5:30, and if I don't get up at 5:30, I'm a bad person, or whatever it is you start to tell yourself when, you need to maybe give yourself a little forgiveness and grace when, things aren't ideal. So, I give myself 2 snoozes. I give myself 2 snoozes and hopefully I'm up by then. But if I'm not up right on the dot, I don't give myself, or I try not to give myself too hard of a time. Because again, here's where the mind comes in and tries to maybe be a little more punishing with these rules. And then all of a sudden we've got this whole other thing going on where everything feels like punishment and everything feels inadequate. So yeah, it's our minds are awesome in how they can work for us and against us.
I think about that rigidity in terms of often I like to make sure I can get 8 hours sleep. So if I'm working on stuff and it's getting later in the night and it's like, oh, I'm not going to get my 8 hours, and then it kind of creates this compounding effect. But you said something about the resilience of if you don't get a good night's sleep, really to allow yourself some latitude, because you were speaking to kind of how the body can respond and adapt.
Yeah. And also, the rules that we make up for ourselves, some of it's just not true. So for example, 8 hours is, I'm not even sure who promoted the 8-hour rule. I have a feeling it may not have been doctors actually. So there's some question about whether 8 hours is really the amount of sleep that's recommended. I think maybe like on a national average, that might be true, but like who's average, right? So 8 might work for you, it might not. So if you get caught up in how things have to be, that's actually when it's going to give you the worst trouble, right? Because now it's like, oh no, I only slept 7.5. Is something terrible going to happen to me the next day? And so with the resilience, keep in mind, we're designed to be survivors. We're going to be okay for a good long time actually before anything untoward happens. So if you're thinking about making changes, yes, follow that instinct and start making some changes. But if you start to get panicked about like, oh my gosh, this is going to give me some terrible chronic disease, then, breathe and know that if you have the intention to change, it's never too late. And 8 hours might actually be 7 hours for you, or even 6 hours. So don't get too hung up on the latest and greatest headline, because oftentimes that's not done with you specifically in mind. That's done, those are figured out by asking bunches of people and they average those outcomes. So it may or may not relate to you.
So what I take from that is I'm not going to crash and burn after one night of disrupted sleep. But
not unless you tell yourself, then you can probably make it happen.
Exactly. what I hear the most frequent interrupter of sleep, so to speak, is that worry, that mental process of worrying throughout the night. Any thoughts about how to mediate that?
Yeah. So, and I think this is especially true with Coronasomnia. I mean, goodness, how many different things can we all list out to be worried about just in 2020, right? And so it's real, right? All these stressors are real, and that's not even taking into account, a, your personal life and all the things that might be going on specific to you. Um, so one of the things that may feel a little strange is that if the mind starts to want to take over, so say it's 3 in the morning and all of a sudden you're awake and you've got all these thoughts, um, get up. I know nobody wants to do it because why would you? You're trying to sleep more. More time in bed doesn't mean you're going to get good quality sleep. So if your mind is already running a wreck, get up because it's not happening. It's not happening. You might as well not contaminate your bed with all those negative associations. So get up, get comfortable, go somewhere else. And if all you can do is worry, then worry somewhere else. Don't contaminate your bed. But if you can, um, give your mind some tenderness, right? It's just trying to keep you alive. At least it thinks so. And it's spinning all these different scenarios. Can you babysit your mind in some way? So is there something that you could do that distracts your mind from thinking about all those things, that, isn't going to necessarily be the be all end all, but will work in that moment? Maybe you listen to an audio book that of a familiar story you already know. Maybe you do some breathing exercises. Maybe you start preparing your oatmeal for the morning, and just that amount of routine kind of helps to calm the mind down. See if you can give your body the chance to fall back asleep. So, I wouldn't turn on lights or, get into like preparing your taxes or some big ordeal like that where it's going to activate your mind. Do something that's going to babysit your mind, something low key, so that maybe you're done with the coloring and now you want to, try to go back to sleep now.
I like that. I know two things that you said to me the other day that we were talking about that I held on to is one is to be gentle with yourself. The other is those things that we're worrying about throughout the night as you get to the morning, how
Not a big deal.
significant, how significant were they?
Yeah, we were thinking about like, oh, should I write that in the email or not write that in the email? And you can obsess about that for 20 minutes. And then the next morning when you write that email, it takes like, 30 seconds total to write the whole entire email. That's just the kind of perspective we tend to have at night. Everything feels really shadowy and weird at night.
Yeah.
But when you get down to it, it's often not that big a deal. So.
I like that, shadowy and weird. That is very true. So Dr. Lynn, if you were to give us just a template of how to get a good night's sleep, what would be included in that?
Sure. I think first of all, go back to old routines that worked for you before. If that's come off of those routines, and go back to it. The other thing is, if you are finding yourself awake for a long time in the middle of the night, definitely get up and only go to bed when you feel like you're actually ready to sleep. Now, if it's been happening chronically, say you've been waking up for, say, 1 or 2 hours a night every single night, you might actually consider trying to go to bed 1 or 2 hours later than normal and still get up at the same time as usual. I know, it's terrible. I know nobody really wants to hear that, but here's the reason why. Our bodies respond over time. We don't respond all that quickly to behavioral change. And what that means is if you're used to being in bed for 8 hours and now you're waking up in the middle of the night for 2 hours, you're getting 6 hours of actual sleep. You can kind of hack that by going to bed 2 hours later and giving yourself the same 6 hours of sleep if you keep it up for a couple of weeks at least, right? And so all of a sudden, you're much more tired because, man, you went to bed late and you woke up anyway, and then you still got up at the same time. Well, rinse and repeat the same thing. What do you think will happen? And eventually you will stop waking up in the middle of the night because you're too tired to wake up. And then you can start sneaking the sleep time earlier and earlier until your body doesn't know the difference and you have it back again.
Excellent. That's counterintuitive, but I could see how it works.
Nobody likes doing it, but it does work.
Any particular resources that you'd recommend?
Yeah, if you have additional questions, definitely feel free to go to my website, go to sleepsd.com. And if you're someone who really does think that you might benefit from, more intervention, there are behavioral sleep medicine specialists out there that, that I can point you to, and in addition to myself, that might be very helpful. So, there are definitely people out there to help. There's also an app called CBTI Coach that's actually put out by the VA and I think by the Defense Department. It goes through something called CBTI, which is an evidence-based treatment for insomnia. And it's an app that goes with it. So if you're curious about what kind of treatment that would be, that app is kind of like the worksheets that go with it, and you can kind of get an overview of what that's like. I'm also coming up with a new course to help people sleep better. So if that's something that's interesting to you, definitely send me an email at mypeacefulsleep@gmail.com, and I'm happy to let you know when that's ready.
Great. And lastly, I would just ask, how would we know when we feel we need to get professional assistance?
I think this will be different for everyone, but first, if you've tried the sort of simplify method that we've talked about in the last half hour, and they seem to be working, but not as well as you want it to, or if you are someone who's chronically been on sleep medications and you don't think that's the way forward anymore, those might be times when getting some extra guidance might be helpful. I would absolutely encourage everyone to go to their primary care doctors too, to make sure that there isn't something that's causing the sleep that's actually much more worrying. So for example, if you've just had a major collision accident, a difficulty in sleep may indicate a bunch of different things, and not to scare anyone, but it could be because you've had a traumatic brain injury. It could be because you've just been frightened and you have a bit of post-traumatic symptoms. And so we don't want to just assume that this is all going to be garden variety insomnia. So definitely make sure that you're up on your health checks as well.
Wonderful. That's very helpful guidance. I just want to reference again Dr. Lynn's website, www.gotosleepsd.com. And then also, if you're interested in her short-term sleep program, mypeacefulsleep@gmail.com. So Dr. Lynn, thank you for supporting us in a better night's sleep, and really appreciate the insights and steps that you've provided to us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I hope everyone sleeps a little better moving forward.
I'm counting on it. Everyone, please be well until we gather again. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.